Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with life coach Dan Mangana. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. I love it whenever Dan mimics me as I'm doing this. It's great.
It's not so great when I get it wrong, Walt, when you decide to change the wording and catch me out. I see what you're doing there.
Yeah, lip syncing is a little bit tough if the recording doesn't stay the same, isn't it?
Yeah, when you're just trying to change it.
Well, that's where it reminds me of back in the day when Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, and Whoopi Goldberg did the what were they called? They were raising money. I can't remember what they were raising money for, but they did these specials every year. And there was one particular routine they would do where Robin would get behind Billy, and Billy would mouth words like he was saying stuff, but Robin was actually doing the talking. And Billy was trying to keep up with whatever it was that Robin was saying and demonstrating with his actions and his gestures. So it was hysterical. He was actually really good at it. He could anticipate where Robin was going and just kind of make it look like he was finishing the same way.
Skills.
And Whoopi's on the side just losing it, just watching these two just melt down in front of an audience. Yeah.
Amazing.
It was great.
Amazing.
But anyway, the big news today, I actually mentioned it yesterday, but I can now verify that it should automatically be on everybody's devices by now on the iPhone side and on the Android side. But we finally have the update to the LOA Today app.
I saw that come through last night.
You did? Okay. Yeah. So it's working. And the big addition is that we've added the book that we did a few years ago called Your Daily Dose of Happy, Real Success Stories of the Law of Attraction, which is a collection of 55 manifestation stories told mostly by life coaches and some pretty cool ones at that. So
nice.
I just wanted to let everybody know, check your devices for the app. For those of you who have already downloaded the app, and take a look. You'll find it under the goodies section, as all good things are found. And for those of you who don't have the app, this is the promo message that says, download the app, download the app, download the app. Good stuff in there. This is our third ebook on there. Dan's ebook is on there. Now this one's on there. We also have Cindy Chavez's ebook for relationships. Plus we got Dan's audio course. We got Linda Armstrong's video course. There's a lot of goodies in this thing. It's growing.
Where's all this coming from?
From generous people like yourself. That's where it's coming from.
Where does it come from? Where did they find it?
And I just wanted to take a moment just to give people a taste of it. We actually gave people a taste of it yesterday. My friend Joel Elston dropped by and chatted with Monique and I. And really
Joel made it in.
What? Joel made it. Yeah.
Nice.
This is the second time in 3 weeks that he came in. I mean, it was pretty cool. And I asked him to tell us the story of Marcus, who was one of the many young boys he has helped who were kind of stuck in the foster care system and who really didn't have a good way out. And Marcus was not his real name, but, he was obviously protecting the kid. But really great story about a kid who had basically been stonewalled and gaslighted about who he was and what his lot was in life. He was convinced that he had all of these psychological conditions because he'd been told that he had them, mainly because he'd just been acting out over the fact that his mom had died in prison and he was being shuttled around in the foster care system.
Wow.
But Joel helped straighten him out on that. And I guess he was on 12 medications. They had him on 12 medications from what Joel could remember. He wasn't sure if that was the exact number, but I mean, just absolutely sick. But he helped the kid understand that really all that they were doing was they were just medicating the fact that they couldn't actually help the fact that he'd had a rough life. And then he was also further educating him about how the law of attraction works, how we can make our own lives. And the kid just got it. He grabbed it and ran with it and ended up turning his life around on a dime. I mean, just completely changed his attitude about everything.
So cool.
He had been, he was one of the many kids who get caught in the system for a long time who are, their grade is oppositionally defiant. They're constantly causing trouble, doing poorly in school, always giving foster parents a hard time. Nobody will ever want to adopt them, that kind of thing. And from that moment on, after that meeting with Joel, First, he went to his foster mom and apologized for his previous behavior and assured her it would never happen again. And then he went to talk to his teacher and assured him of the same thing and promised that he now wanted to sit in the front of the class where he could learn everything that was being taught. He just completely changed everything around, turned his life around. And this actually happened, I guess the original incident happened about 5 or 6 years ago. He is now preparing to enter the university. He is pursuing a degree in psychology. He wants to become another Joel Elston, I guess. I mean, what a story. It was a wonderful story. And
that's a really beautiful story.
It is. It's gorgeous. And it's just an example of what
some of the kind of stories that are in the book.
Yeah, really, really good stories. They're inspirational.
Definitely. You know? I agree with that.
I think we need that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly we look for it, particularly early on when we're exploring these concepts. We want to see, well, does this stuff really work for real world people?
There was this thing like this morning, I actually had a bit of a fluff. This morning, I don't know what happened. I just started asking myself, do I even believe in this stuff? Is it real?
Yeah.
And I was having one of those sort of like, not crisis of confidence so much, but I don't know what was going on. And that's not what's important. What's important was that it's stories like these and spending time in stories like these that actually give us the power to keep going, because it is easy, I think, especially if you didn't grow up around this stuff. I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. We weren't learning all of this stuff. This isn't what was going on.
It's usually not at the top of the list. No,
it wasn't at the top of the list. And so, there wasn't that much, there isn't, historically, for me, evidence to support that this is the way that you look at life or the way that things go. And so having these stories does actually create some support mentally around actually keeping your vibration up, getting leverage to keep doing the work and to stick with it, because there's going to be contrast in life, particularly when you start to become more aware of this kind of information. I think that it can make things harder first before it makes them easier, because now you're aware of what's going on. And so your responsibility as a conscious creator steps up. But having this evidence, this evidential experience to come to, I think is really, really powerful.
I think so too. In fact, the other thing I think it really does, and you tell me if this is similar to your experience or to the experience of people that you work with, because you work with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. For myself, when I heard, it was one thing to hear the stories in like the movie The Secret, right? Because there's some stories in there too, and that's good. They kind of get your appetite whetted, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But when you hear the stories from somebody that or somebody who you're 2 or 3 degrees connected to, who you trust the source of the story, somehow it seems more real. I don't know why. It just seems more real, and it seems to have more of an impact, so that when you finally get to the point where you have your own experience, where something happens that kind of caught you by surprise, and, oh wow, I guess did I manifest that? These stories I find kind of reinforce, other people had the same thing happen too. I can actually, on some level, begin to trust this result that I got was a real result.
Well, this is something that, again, that's been one of those. I think I've got 14 podcasts I'm doing this week, not including this show. Or something.
I thought I was doing a lot. Jeez.
Something like that. And when you're going over and over and over and over and over through this stuff, you get a chance to keep coming back to the core concepts. And when you're going over the through line of what you have to contribute, at least in my part, to this narrative, like it keeps ringing in. And one of the things that's been driven home really, really powerfully this week, again, is that possibility doesn't equal probability, but that probability's reduction only happens because of the illusionary distance that we create in our minds between us and the outcome. Mm-hmm. So everything's here and now, but because we create this space with our limiting beliefs and our stories and narratives, it starts to look further and further away. Mm-hmm. But these stories bring it closer and closer and closer. Yeah, and when it's real people, if Oprah Winfrey tells me a story, okay, Oprah Winfrey told me a story, that's great, but she's Oprah Winfrey.
Right.
If Bob up the road is telling me a story, now it's a bit closer. Yeah. Because there's more stories that I can layer on this, through this facade of, celebrity and stuff. But when it's real people doing real stuff, that distance just shortens. And that means that the narratives that we've got in our mind, creating this illusionary space, reduces to that chasm disappears, and it's more easy for us to accept the truth of the availability of that thing here and now.
I agree. Yeah, I think you got it. You nailed it. It's that it's a real person. Not that Oprah Winfrey isn't a real person.
Oh no, she's a real human. She's got real stuff.
Yeah, but we associate those who seem closer to us as being more real for some reason. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it is true.
I think there's more space for stories. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the unconscious mind is always seeking to keep our worldview in place, and whenever it's got an opportunity to support that, it's gonna take it. And when someone's further away, there's an opportunity for it to have space to be able to say, "Oh yeah, that's great," but it's like, "Oh yeah, that's great for you," but and blah blah blah. We don't have the space to do that so much when it's real people. It's not. It's like, of course, they're successful. They ripped people off. Of course, that person's successful. They got money, silver spoon in their mouth, or whatever.
Right.
Of course, that person's healthy. They've got good genes. Of course, that person's in a loving relationship. Have you seen how gorgeous they are? All of these things that we've got to reframe the possibility for us disempoweringly.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's it. So anyway, I wanted to share one more story. I'm not going to read a whole bunch of them, but I want to share one more story just because the market story was so successful. And I wanted to pick one that doesn't fit one of the big three categories. The big three in my mind are getting more money, getting great relationships, and improving your health. Okay. I want to get one that's not one of those. Okay. I want one that's just kind of like a little off the beaten path. And I'm picking one from somebody who I do know personally. And she actually was a co-host for a while here on the show. And it's a cool story because it's an unusual ask. So here we go. The person who wrote the story is Anne Marie McEwen. She used to be a co-host with me on Sunday nights when I was doing a Sunday night show for a while. And she operates a nonprofit organization in Middletown, Connecticut called the Buttonwood Tree. And I won't tell you a whole lot more because she's going to tell you about it in the story. So let me just start the story. The story is entitled A Steinway Piano. At the north end of Main Street in Middletown, Connecticut, sits the Buttonwood Tree, our beloved community arts center. It was named for its birthplace, once known as the Avenue of the Buttonwoods. In 1989, Wesleyan University alumna named Susan Eastman Allison opened a used bookstore called the Ibis. It soon became a hub of activity where creativity and community flourished. Besides being a bookstore, the Ibis became an informal gathering place for people to share their ideas and talents. It bustled with activity and brought positive energy to the neighborhood. Now, 2 years later, the Ibis morphed into a nonprofit arts organization called the North End Arts Rising, while retaining its nickname, the Buttonwood Tree. It served the community by offering books, poetry readings, and programs for personal enrichment and the cultivation of artistic talent. Jump forward to February 2007. I found myself needing to recreate myself after my retirement from my career as a dental hygienist, and more recently from my business as a food truck operator. I decided to volunteer in areas that interested me and see where it would lead me. In addition to serving Miles for Smiles and the Coalition for Children, I responded to a newspaper ad looking for volunteers to help write grants for the Buttonwood Tree. I had a brief, very positive experience years earlier with the Buttonwood Tree, and I knew that they were about music and the arts, so I joined. 3 months later, one of the people on the grant writing team, Kunle Mwanga, and I probably mispronounced that person's name, so apologies, invited me to join the board of directors for the Buttonwood Tree, my first board position. I accepted, not knowing what it entailed, but believing that they were doing good work in the community. For about 9 months, I volunteered for all three organizations and learned all about North End Arts Rising and the Buttonwood Tree. Simultaneously, I focused on learning and growing to make myself the best person I could be, diving into reading all the Conversation with God books by Neil Donald Walsh, Louise Hayes' You Can Heal Your Life, studying the Teachings of Abraham books by Esther and Jerry Hicks. And meanwhile, the Buttonwood Tree was kind of operating in low gear. Suffering from the economic downturn and a lack of leadership after Susan Allison stepped down due to illness, and due to programming and funding needs reaching their lowest ebb, I helped to write some grants, and I did my best to inject hope, but half the board members wanted to just shut our doors. Our executive director stepped down to have a baby, and things looked pretty dim. I resigned from everything but the North End Arts Rising Board, and then I took a trip to Hawaii to see my daughter. I stayed for 6 weeks, and while there, I was offered a job to run a sustainable seafood fast food truck. I'd have jumped at the chance if it weren't in Hawaii, but I knew that my daughter wouldn't be there very long, and all my family was in Connecticut, so I declined. So returning to the Buttonwood Tree, I learned that soon we'd have, no executive director. There had been much discussion about closing for months, and at our next board meeting, 3 directors voted to close down. 3 others, including myself, voted to keep our doors open. The only problem was that, since we had no funds, one of us needed to take over as executive director. As I voted to stay open, I felt the tug inside me, a nudge and a knowing that said this was my new job. We all looked around the table in silence. It was a scary moment. I knew nothing about administration and nonprofits. I had no qualifications or experience. But knowing that my gut wouldn't lead me astray, I said I would take the job. I told them I knew nothing and didn't know if I was capable. John Basinger, as the president, looked at me reassuringly. He convinced me I could do it and offered to mentor me, helping as much as I needed. My saving grace was that I had a passion for keeping the Buttonwood Tree open with some decent writing skills, a love for music, and an even deeper love for humanity tossed in for good measure. As executive director, it's my job to keep everything running smoothly, all systems go, you might say. I was in charge of everything from programs to posters, including booking the acts, paying bills, and maintaining all the equipment. And over the years, we held many poetry events and classes of all sorts, from painting to yoga. But the main focus of our arts program was to provide concerts by local and touring musicians. For a small arts organization, we had some good basic equipment in the music department, a great sound system with top microphones. One item that was not quite up to par, however, was the piano. It was with great distress that I would bring in world-class pianists to perform at the Buttonwood Tree on a very inferior piano with various mechanical problems and issues with tuning stability. Their performances would suffer as a result. Our piano tuner and repairman was one of the best in the area, Bruce MacLeod, but he would make repairs until it couldn't be fixed anymore. And at one concert, the piano rolled away from the pianist. We had to laugh about it at the time, and the pianist was more than cordial about it, but I was mortified. We needed another piano soon. In our small space, the issue of the piano often brought up the question, should we get an upright instead of the baby grand that we had? Because we attracted pianists due to having the piano, and the piano happened to be my favorite instrument, I was emphatic about keeping the baby grand size. So Bruce bought a rebuilt piano from his friend and did his best with it. That held up fairly well, but it was still far from perfect. And we were fortunate to have many world-class musicians at the Buttonwood. One music teacher, Carolyn Halstead, performed classical piano concerts at the Buttonwood occasionally throughout the years. After we had the piano rebuilt, I invited her to play again. The concert was nice, and afterward I asked her to come back sometime, but I'll never forget her response. She said to me in the most gentle, kind, and sympathetic tone, "I'm sorry. I just can't play that piano." Her softened facial expression revealed how painful playing it had been to her. That pain embedded in me a very strong desire to get a fantastic piano so she would return and be happy to play at our place. I told her I'd do what I could to get another piano and asked what kind of piano I should seek to be suitable both to her and to the many other pianists we hosted. With humility and reserve, she sweetly said that, well, she had a Steinway at home. I could see in her eyes that she knew we couldn't afford one and that we'd probably never get a really good piano, but I felt otherwise. I felt hope and a drive to remedy the situation. In that moment, I vowed to myself to get a good piano, one she deserved to play on, worthy of the very pianists in the world, a Steinway. The next day, I added a Steinway to our online wish list. I talked to our piano tutor and told him that I wanted a Steinway. He chuckled and said it would never happen. I replied, "I can hope, can't I?" He smiled and nodded. "Well, of course you can. Good luck with that." So I hoped. I imagined having happy pianists, and I talked about it with anyone who would listen. Concerts came and went. Pianists asked to perform, and I turned many of them down, saying someday when we have a better piano, we would be happy to host them. When I stood in front of the audience, welcoming them and introducing the musicians, I told them that we were hoping one day to get a Steinway piano for these wonderful pianists. I put out the word that we wanted a new piano, preferably a Steinway, and my passion for it never died. We actually got several calls from people offering pianos, but their pianos were really no better than what we already had. Concerts came and went. 3 years later, in early September, I received an interesting phone call from a gentleman who lived about an hour away. Steve Gordon was moving, and he had a piano he couldn't fit into his new home. Though he had someone who offered to purchase it, he wanted to know who we were and what we would do with the piano. After having fielded several such calls in the past, I learned that many people just wanted someone to take their piano away. Being cautious by now, I asked about his piano and its condition. It turned out his was a Steinway in perfect condition. I was thrilled at the possibility. He wanted his piano to go to a good home where it would be played often and appreciated by many. We spoke for 45 minutes all about the Buttonwood Tree and how we serve the community, who would be using the piano, who our performers are, all the details. He said he would think about it and talk to some people about our organization and then call me. I waited with bated breath, but felt deep down, this was it. I could sense it happening, and it felt so exciting. A few days later, Steve called back and confirmed he would give us the piano. I was ecstatic and beside myself with joy. We were getting a Steinway in perfect condition. It took 3 years, but it was worth it. And then it got even better. Because the next issue was timing. Steve didn't know when the move would happen, so we put things on hold. He said he'd call me and let me know when I'd have to pick it up. When that call came in, I'd have to be ready, so I called the movers. Now, in the same time frame, we planned to put down a new floor at the Buttonwood Tree. We had received a grant and planned the job to be done in late October. Our space has a lovely performance room that doubles as an art gallery, about 20 feet by 20 feet, and the other room is a small bookstore. To redo the floor, we'd have to move everything from one room to the other, from one room to the other, and of course the piano had to be disassembled. I talked to a local moving company about moving our old piano, and we arranged for the piano to be disassembled and moved on Monday, then returned to its space after the floor was done. On the Friday before the floor was to be done, I got the call from Steve. He said the piano needed to be picked up on the following Tuesday. Serendipitously, the same week we planned to redo the floor. This meant we could pick up his piano, store it for a few days, and then move it into the performance space after the floor was done. So we moved the old piano to the moving company for storage until we eventually traded it away. And the moving company didn't even charge us for storing the Steinway. Only the universe could have planned it so well. How's that?
Do you know the thing I love about that?
What's that?
It didn't happen overnight.
That's right. That's right.
And I think sometimes when we get into... and I'm glad you shared that story out of all of them, because I think when we start talking about manifestation stories, people automatically go to, oh, I wrote a check to myself for $1 billion and I woke up and it descended from rainbows and leprechauns. Leprechauns brought the gold bullion into my bedroom. And that's not really generally how I see it working. And like you said, I get to see people have these conversations every day. Generally speaking, it's real people achieving real things in a beautiful way that they feel good about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think those are some of the most powerful manifestation stories. Stories where people have had to overcome doubt, adversity. In this instance, other people saying, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, right.
And years later, 3 years later, the piano comes. Not only does it come, but it's exactly the one she wanted in perfect condition, and everything worked out really, really well.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think the time frame is really important because how often do we put out a request, particularly for something that seems really hard to get, and say, and I want it to happen 3 years from now. We usually don't do it that way. Like, I want it now. How soon can I get it? You know?
Where is my lover, my beloved? Right. Bring them in angelic form.
So we tend to get a little impatient, shall we say? Yeah. Not being ready to let it come in its own time. But she didn't do that. Anne-Marie's a good manifester, as you can tell. I mean, she basically took a broken and strapped organization and turned it into something that flourishes. I mean, they have acts coming in there all the time, really interesting, offbeat, unusual musical acts, very skilled, very talented. They have art shows. They have yoga. They have something called laughter yoga. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah, a friend of mine actually is
they do laughter yoga.
Master laughter yoga thing.
It's weird. It's a really weird concept. I'll let her explain. We'll bring her onto the show sometime. She can explain it. It's basically you start laughing for no reason at all.
Yeah, but I feel like I was like, did get it?
That's pretty much it, except it's a little bit more enthusiastic. But yeah. It's strange and strained too. But that's another thing. Mm-hmm. But they have so many different things going on there, and she manifested all of them. And I mentioned that because when I edited this book and when I was selecting the stories to put into it, I wanted stories that felt like they were real world. They weren't magic tricks. And the reason I say that is I wanted to remind people everything is a manifestation. Mm-hmm. Everything in our lives is a manifestation. What I was hoping that readers of the book would do is realize, yeah, they're cool stories. Yeah, they are manifestation stories, but they're very similar to the things that have already been happening in my life. I don't need to learn this. I already know it. I've already been experiencing this. Whether I've been experiencing manifesting stuff that I actually wanted, that's another question.
That's the other part of it.
That's the other part.
I manifested something that I don't want.
So many people know how to do that. Yeah, well, I guess I could do that.
I do Uncle Walt. I know how to do it.
But that's the thing. Once it becomes personally real, and I think that's the way to make it personally real, to recognize everything is a manifestation that's in our lives. I think that's where, for instance, the techniques you teach becomes so valuable, because you're tying in stuff to what actually happens in somebody's lives. They're not, or people's lives. You're not, like you said, you're not doing the unicorns and fairy dust thing. No. Because, well, first of all, it doesn't work very well. And second of all, you get results the other way, and you've had lots of results with people.
But, the funny thing is people that hang around with me long enough realize that I may not lead with the angels, rainbows, and unicorns, but it generally ends up coming with rainbows, angels, and unicorns. It's like I've got another one of my guys is just hit the 7-figure club.
Really?
Another one of my guys hit the 7-figure club, and
good for him.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that he came down to Cabo to hang out for like a few days, and while he was hanging out, just here sipping cocktails by the pool, like the multi-million-dollar deal lands in his lap.
Wow!
While he's hanging around, like just hanging out.
That's crazy. That's really crazy.
And the funny thing was that I think he came down on the Friday. Unfortunately, that's the day Olga's dad passed away. So I didn't get to see him then. And the Saturday, because he'd flown in, and Olga said, look, she wanted some time to herself. So we still went out. We went fishing, although we didn't catch any fish. And then I didn't actually end up hanging out with him as much as I'd planned to, but he hung out with some of the other guys. And Tuesday, he and I had some time for a couple of hours. Then Wednesday, the next day, that's when the deal, like, he'd just been literally hanging out, working on his book, seeing some of our friends down here. And yeah, it just literally just sort of dropped in. So it comes that way, but that's not what we're leading with. We're allowing the magic to be a part of a very grounded experience that we're seeking to create.
So maybe I was anticipating too much. Maybe I was inferring too much by suggesting that you stay away from the unicorns.
I stay away from them on the front end, but they inevitably crash the party anyway.
Okay.
So they come through the door. What do you mean you don't want magic? It's generally what happens. So yeah, it's funny.
So let me try to redeem myself. I'll go to the front end because that's the safe end at this point. The front end where you deal with just, I'll call it the more mundane stuff. And I don't say that in any way to disrespect the stuff. I just say it to simply point out it's just what we would consider the real world stuff.
Yeah, everyday stuff.
Yeah. So at that end, I mean, I know what you've taught in the ebook that you shared with us, Money Game. Basically just starting at very low monetary figures and intending that they manifest and kind of keeping track over time and doing a little appreciation ritual each time and building the number up over time. So I understand how you do it there. How do you do it with relationships, for instance?
Well, I mean, we kind of allude to how through the book, because in the book I do give some, other examples, how to use it in your business and how to use it in your career and stuff like that, the same principles. But it's exactly the same thing. One of the funny things that I always love to come back to with people that are like, you're this kind of person, all you think about is money and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's just, this isn't a measuring stick. It's a very tangible measuring stick. If I apply a set of principles to create $10, right, and I apply them properly, the $10 will show up. If it doesn't show up, then I haven't applied the principles properly. But how I manifest $10, how I manifest the love of my life, how I manifest health in my body, how I manifest joy and happiness, it's exactly the same principles. The universe doesn't change the way that it's constructed based on what we're creating. But when I'm using something tangible like money, I've got an eyes-on clue as to whether I'm doing it or not. And once I have those principles and I've mastered them, using this measurable gauge as to where I'm at, then I can go and spin and direct it to everyone else, because ultimately what we get is who we are, and who we are is comprised of what we're choosing consciously or unconsciously, what our vibration is, what our beliefs are, and what our choices and behaviors are. When all of those things line up, something shows up, and I can practice and rehearse commanding my intentionality, my vibrational flow, my belief system narratives, and also my behavior using money, and then direct that to other outcomes also.
You just used a very interesting word. It's one that Amy Blackford used a couple of Mondays ago, command, to command that something happen. And she's been really experimenting with that concept in a big way with some pretty interesting results. What does the word command mean to you that is really, germane to this whole process?
Directing from a place of agency. Someone that's in authority makes a command. Ariana, my stepdaughter, tries to command, but she has no authority, so it's not really a command. It's like, dude, you need to go and have your shower right now. Okay. Right. Do you get where I'm coming from? Yeah. Like a commander in some kind of military force gives a command to their subordinates, because the subordinates understand that the relationship is, I accept those commands from my commanding officer. When I'm in true dominion, I'm in a position where I've established that the command flow between myself and reality is I speak and reality responds. We all have that, because in the beginning was the word, but we don't apply it or stand in that agency. In fact, we give that power away. We have our commanding button, we have baton, we have our magic wand, but we give that away and we put it down through blame, through passing the buck, and all we need to do is pick it up. Wave that wand.
It's an important one. It's an important concept. And you mentioned your daughter, how she commands without necessarily being in a place of command. And I'm sure
she attempts it.
Well, I'm sure that in her own mind, she is in command. Otherwise, she wouldn't attempt it. She's, well, I am in command. I'm the one giving the command here. It's very straightforward. It's probably a bit of a surprise when it doesn't quite work the way she anticipated that it would. But isn't that part of it? Isn't it part of it is just believing you are in command?
At the end of the day, we again, that whole thing of believing, the command that we have is a result of the belief that we have in our ability to command. And if we don't believe we're in command, guess what? We magic our way into a reality where we're not in command. So once
again, the law of attraction proving that it plays out the way it is, because you're not in command. So guess what? You're not in command.
Because the universe is not a tyrant. God is not a tyrant. Spirit is not a tyrant. The divine is not a tyrant. It's just, right, be better if you did be in command. But if you don't fancy it, I guess your subconscious is going to be in command, and then we'll see how that works out, because we are always making commands, but generally we're making them unconsciously through negative bias and from the space of our unconscious programs. And then we look and say, oh, it's fate, it's the devil, it's because I didn't shake my leg twice, or I didn't XYZ ABCD, I'm not vegan, that was coming. And we have all of these things, but no, it's just we surrendered the driving of the car to the navigator of the unconscious, instead of being consciously in the driver's seat and directing ourselves to where we want to go.
That was pretty good. We actually got to the 34-minute and 15-second before the word vegan got included in the conversation.
I didn't mention it at all last week, so you better factor that in. I'm going to stuff you with tofu.
Vegans everywhere are celebrating. Oh my goodness, that's funny.
But yeah, everything's responding to belief, including the belief that we have power or don't.
Or that we don't. Yeah, that's true. I was actually going to go somewhere with it. Where was I going? I was going to...
You said command is a very interesting word you used, command, and you mentioned that it was brought up on Monday.
And then it just all went out of my head. So I apparently didn't command it to come back.
All right.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to divert for a second. That'll probably bring it back to me. All right. Okay. To remind people that good friend of yours who you introduced to the show, Debbie Garcia, is joining us tomorrow as a co-host.
Debbie's in the house.
Debbie's in the house. Yeah. That's somebody who learned how to command.
Oh yeah, she's about it. she's definitely accepted that invitation. Definitely.
In a big way. Yeah. Yeah. I've described her earlier this week as a force of nature, as a superpower in a small body. I mean, she is bigger than she looks. She is. She's just powerful. She's this powerful presence on the microphone. It's really something. So I'm looking forward to beginning that new chapter here on LOA Today and adding her story and adding her voice. And I guess we're actually going to be talking about kind of combining forces, because I guess we're going to talk about combining what we're doing here with what she's doing there and mixing it up. And I'm not quite sure how all that's going to work out, but it should be fun anyway, no matter how it works out. So let's see. Did that cue in my mind what I was trying to bring up? No, it didn't. Not at all. It didn't work. So let's see. Where can we go with it instead? Well, commanding. I know that commands for me are something that for the longest time seemed outside of my realm. Because I had bought in, like most people do, to the idea that, well, you have to be that person in authority. You have to be given that authority and then you can give a command. But then I tried computer programming. And in computer programming, everything that you type into a computer program is a command. They're all commands. They may be really small commands like turn on monitor. You know, it may be nothing more than that, but it's still a command. And programmers describe it as a command. What that did for me is that it gave me a completely different perspective on command. And it made me question something. I want to ask, this is part of what I wanted to ask you about, I think, but I still don't quite have that original thought.
The original thought.
But it's in that direction. The idea of authority. Literally, the word authority derives from the word author. To author something, to write something down and publish it and distribute it is where the origin of the word authority comes from. It's the same basic root. We in our modern societies take it quite a bit further than that. I mean, there are a lot of people in authority who've never, written a word in their lives. They don't necessarily know anything about how to write a book, but we've expanded it quite a bit. And I guess first question to ask you is, to what degree do you think writing something is important in terms of being designated an author? In other words, can you self-authorize by being a writer? A lot of people try to do that. A lot of people want to become authors because it gives them credibility, and it works. I mean, people buy into how credible you are based on what you write. What do you think? I mean, how important is the authority side of being able to command?
In our own lives or in the lives of others?
Yes. A little bit of both, really.
I mean, this comes, I think it's there's a couple of veins here that come to mind for me. First and foremost, we were talking before about the distance that appears because of belief, right? So I'm here on the show, right? I've been in Wall Street Journal, I've been in Forbes magazine, I'm author for I'm now a contributor to a respected magazine. I'm in podcasts all over the time, blah, blah, blah. That's great. But I can buy a lot of that. I could pay a PR agency to get me put in a magazine.
Yep.
What's the substance of what I say? And is what I'm saying actually making a difference in your life? So often we get bought or sold, and buy into these ideas, or because somebody is this or somebody's that, that person's going to save me, or what they've got to say is going to be the truth for me. But is it? I don't know. I haven't tried it. And there are people that I've seen in my own life, seen it firsthand, giving up the opportunity to have something real because they're chasing after a story that hits the right switches in our head and allows us to buy into it. There's a guy called, I think his name's Mike Winnett or something like that. He runs around on YouTube going for people in our industry and basically debunking the ones that are fake gurus, and he calls them entrepreneurs. And he's got this show that he has, and you've got to look at it. It's hilarious. It's got the one called Entrepreneur Bingo. And he's basically got like these things that are in a picture. Now, it's not about entrepreneur. It's basically effective selling. But what's happened is people are taking effective selling strategies and applying it to sell things that aren't maybe the value that they are, because the buying process is psychological. You can tweak someone into buying something if they don't need it. You can get them into a state where they say yes, whether using NLP, the right word patterns, whether you know how to dance around objections. It's actually crazy, the voodoo magic that can go on in sales. And Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, really popularized these ideas, I think, because he did actually, he was making millions and millions and millions, getting people to buy stuff, and they were like, they were having short circuits. But this guy, Mike, is basically going after people. Now, some of the people he goes after, I actually know that their work is good. Maybe they had a few bad reviews, or they didn't have the right customer service. But because they followed this method, he said that they were wrong. Point being that I may not even have something that's real, but I can sell you on it and get you to buy into it. Some of these people that we're chasing or looking up to, they just know how to present information in a way that you buy into it. Mm-hmm. So the authority that comes from some of these things is sometimes warranted and sometimes not. I'd invite the listeners to look behind the veneer and actually see, is this giving results in my life?
Right, because that's ultimately where the rubber meets the road. That's really what counts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can get caught up in the sexy stuff that's not even really real. But anyway, that's what I have to say on that one. In terms of our own life, stop waiting for some external validation of your power. You were born with the authority to command in your own life. Stop waiting for someone to give you a blue tick on your social media profile, or for someone to pat you on the back, or to get that feature that you're waiting for to validate you. That be validated within yourself to command your own life.
It's the ultimate validation, really. Mm-hmm. It has to come from within. Otherwise, it's not going to be as meaningful. We often associate the meaning coming from somebody else, but it's actually more meaningful when it comes from ourselves, I think.
I think it's always going to be empty if it comes from somebody else.
Yeah.
It's going to be devoid of the real validator, which is ourselves.
Well, I'm not sure if it's completely empty, because we appreciate, somebody validated, like, oh, well, thank you. That was good. That helps. Yeah. So it's not completely empty, but it's certainly not as powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. By the way, that did actually cue my mind, because you did it in a way that I didn't quite expect. You talked about a guy who was a debunker who was basically dismissing. That's what my original thought was about. Oh,
let's go. Let's get on with debunking. Good old Mike Winnett.
I was doing some research on something I was preparing to write for. I'm going to start doing some rather long blog posts, and so I figured I was going to write my first blog post. I had a topic in mind, doing some research. Come across this article where this guy was writing about Louise Hay back in the 1980s, early 1980s. Mm-hmm. Or actually, he was writing toward the end of the 80s. And his article was basically just dissing her for ripping people off, promising them ridiculous things like, if you follow my multi-step method here, you will cure yourself of disease. And then they do all the things right and they die anyway. And how shameful that she's taking all their money and she's making herself wealthy, selling this shell game to people. I mean, it was that kind of a tone to the whole thing. And I didn't know Louise Hay at all. I don't know a whole lot about her. I think I saw one interview with her. I've seen her books, so I don't know a lot about how she would respond. I kind of imagine she would just kind of ignore it, because she wasn't somebody who was, go out there and fight people. That was not her personality. Mm-hmm. But I kind of imagine, how would she have responded internally to that person? I kind of suspect she just ignored it and just dismissed it.
I mean, we all get them. We
do.
We all get them. Look, put it this way. I've got a deliberately small community at the moment of people, right, where everyone has the opportunity to get to know everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
The testimonials in there aren't BS. They're real people that you can actually send them a message and see who they are.
Right.
But even in that, there's still people that hit a wall and decide, well, you know, this and that and blah, 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 and I've got something to say. There's always going to be somebody that's holding their worldview in place by putting down someone else. I even had there's another guy called Coffeezilla, I think his name is, on YouTube. I love watching these debunkers. I think it's hilarious. And he actually did this in-depth research that showed that Napoleon Hill was probably the biggest contributor of all time.
Really? Interesting.
I don't normally watch long YouTube videos, but I sat and watched all 30 something minutes or whatever of that because it was fascinating, the argument that he put forward. And my thing is this: we all have a responsibility for ourselves as to what we step out and do and making a choice as to whether we're going to do something or not. If I elect not to take on conventional medicine and to go a non-conventional path, I need to acknowledge that there's going to be risks associated with that because if my belief systems don't support that fully and completely, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. There are people that are neglecting to go and do modern medicine that they believe in, to go and do chanting and plant medicine, which they don't necessarily believe in. So their lack of belief is going to trump the little bit of belief that might be there. And you'd be better off just going to get chemo. You'd be better off going to get surgery, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe juxtaposing positivity, uplifting, getting your daily dose of happy alongside conventional medicine. I think sometimes people not really making that connect, go into using magic when they don't even really believe in it. They're having my crisis of confidence I had this morning, but at a deeper level, on top of the stress of dealing with a challenging situation, and then wonder why it doesn't manifest.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true.
And then blame the person and blame the messenger. There are enough people who have successfully applied the work of Louise, whose legacy continues in Hay House, which millions and millions and millions of books. But guess what? Not everybody that applies some of that stuff is going to work. I mean, I've been to Dr. Joe Dispenza events. I've seen people that came in on a wheelchair leave without a wheelchair. I've seen people come in blind and leave able to see. I've seen it with my own eyes, and yet people will still say Dr. Joe's full of poop. Mm-hmm. No, Dr. Joe is just someone that's created a space where we can heal if we are ready to heal, but we're not always ready to heal and then complain that the healing doesn't happen. I think we have to just take responsibility for our own journey and stop blaming other people. That's why. Well,
I think you hit the nail on the head, taking responsibility for our own journeys. Because the thing that I took away, and I can't say I've done as much looking into the debunkers as you have. I have checked out a few of them, but not perhaps as many as you have.
These two are hilarious. One of the other one, Coffeezilla, he actually sometimes gets them to come on and has a showdown, and he gets a moderator and has a showdown with these people. And it's amazing to watch in action. You got to check it out.
What do you mean amazing? What's the amazing part?
Dude, you're selling crap. And they'll still be well, if people don't, blah, 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 blah. And you can see they're I'm going to use this because no press is bad press, and I'm going to use this to get you literally see it playing out. And you're just oh my God, this is a train wreck.
Yeah, right.
This is a train wreck. So yeah, it's hilarious, I think.
I guess what I was thinking when I saw this particular article that I referenced about this guy debunking Louise Hay is I looked at who he was because I had some bit about his credentials and so forth, and he was I would describe him in very generic terms as being a moderate to liberal Christian minister, and he was dismissing from that perspective. And pretty harshly in some ways, which I thought was interesting. I'm not used to that genre of minister being that negative. I mean, they can. It's not like, they can't do that, but I'm just not used to seeing that from generically that kind of minister. But I was seeing it here, and I kept thinking about, okay, so what were his particular criticisms? And I kind of went through them one by one, and I asked myself, okay, so what does he think instead? And as I started piecing it together, I realized what a limited view of life he had. Very, very small frame that his understanding of how life works operated in. And it almost felt like a straitjacket. which is really interesting. I didn't quite expect. I expected to kind of like be pissed off at the guy or something like that. That's not what the reaction was. The reaction was pity. I felt sorry for him, and I don't mean like, well, I feel sorry for this guy. He doesn't get it. No, like I really felt sorry for him. Like, oh God, I feel embarrassed for him. That's the way I always feel like. It was a really interesting thing. I guess it's just another example of how perspective works, because everybody brings different perspectives, and different perspectives lead to different conclusions. But it was really interesting, just very interesting to kind of see through the eyes of somebody to the extent that I could, who doesn't see eye to eye with me at all, who doesn't get what we're talking about. Who, if he was listening to this podcast, he'd write a really nasty article, I'm sure. But
and you know what?
Understanding from his viewpoint was really weird.
One of the things that I love to keep in mind, Will, is maybe it's not for them.
Well, obviously it's not. Yeah.
And maybe his way of creating works for him.
Maybe it does. Yeah.
I know some prayer warriors of all different faiths and religions that when they get down and put a prayer together, it moves mountains and things happen. They're not using the law of attraction,
per se,
as far as they're concerned.
Right.
But truth just is. And the fact is that the universe is constructed on a series of laws, and we access the truth of those laws through different names, through different guises. It's like my purple brick theory. So many people are looking at this thing and calling it a different name and getting the same result, positive or not so positive. Ultimately, what comes down is our personal relationship to it, and are we living a life that we want to live?
And as you were saying that, I remembered one of the things I did. Whenever I deal with somebody who's coming from a strong Christian background, I always keep in my back pocket the idea of sowing and reaping, because any Christian can identify with that. And so one of the questions I asked myself was, okay, if I were sitting talking with this guy, and he would, doing his stuff, and he finally took a breath, I'd say to him something like, so what do you think of sowing and reaping? Just, open question, right? see what he has to say about it. And then, at some point, not hit him over the head with it, but point out, well, that really is the same thing as law of attraction. And just see what the reaction is, Yeah. And I couldn't quite imagine how he would react. I tried really hard to feel it from his perspective. The best I could come up with it, I think it probably would have surprised him a little bit. It just felt like like I hadn't thought of it that way, and I've got to find some way to regroup to attack that. I'm not sure how to do it, but I'll find a way. But I wasn't sure how he would respond to it. I really wasn't.
And when I look at this idea of naming different things, I generally speaking don't invite resistance by just using whatever words are going to be comfortable with the people that I'm around. If I'm with a Muslim, I'll talk about Allah. If I'm with a Christian, I'll talk about God or Jesus, like just whatever facilitates having the space to have an expansive conversation where we can both move forward with the context of it not being lost in ideas around the meaning of words that really only have meaning because we've given them meaning. I
think a lot of it too is recognizing where the hot buttons are, so you can avoid the hot buttons.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they just basically just stop conversation and turn it into fights.
Yeah, and then what was the point? We're just wasting glycogen that's available for us to go and do other things to have a conversation about something that's not going anywhere anyway. Let me.
I got to check. Have I wasted my glycogen today? I got to check.
We literally got like a few shots of that, and we're going to just use it all on. Really. This is what we're doing with the glycogen for today. But we're never going to get this back. It's gone forever, and we're allowing this thing to go forever on the back of something that should have never been here in the first place, really.
I mean, do I realize how much time and effort I put in to acquire that glycogen, and now I'm throwing it out the
window? For what? Get out of here. Sit down and have a milkshake, you crazy cunt.
I love it. That's funny.
Yeah.
The purple brick theory is a nice way to remind yourself, I think, to just let it go.
Yeah.
Just let it go and
really let it go.
Yeah.
It's not really helping anybody
No.
at all.
No. Well, I got to ask you one thing. Where did purple brick come from? I'm curious about that part.
So it's just that we're all looking at the. Didn't I tell you this story? Have I not told you this story?
I think you told. I don't remember if you told me where the purple brick theme came from. I remember you talking about what the metaphor means, but I don't remember where the theme came from.
So just looking at the same thing from different angles, so it's the same brick. Mm-hmm. And purple is a colour that's not associated with anybody's skin colour, so nobody's going to get anything.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's where it comes from. Got it.
Nobody's
all right.
going to, and they're just random purple. Okay, we go with purple.
Okay, all right. Yeah, well, that works.
And you remember a purple brick because it's a bit random. So
yeah, they're kind of unusual.
Yeah, purple brick. What the? Glycogen.
Oh, there goes some more wasted glycogen right out the window.
There goes the glycogen gone again. Yeah.
Okay, purple bricks. I'm not. See, now what you're going to do is you got me thinking about imagining an entire building built out of purple bricks. A purple brick building.
What beautiful, inclusive building it might be.
Yeah, it'd be pretty. I'd like it. Seriously, I mean, that sounds really nice. Because you see, you've seen like painted brick buildings and so forth. Why not painted purple like a royal building?
There you go.
Yeah, it's nice. I like it. Okay, well, this has been a great way to kind of ease people in to checking out the app, checking out the stories. And I would like to invite listeners to not only check them out, but read them and send in your impressions. Tell us what you think. If there's a story, like maybe you read the Steinway piano story and that one really resonates with you. What did you like about it? Why did you enjoy it so much? Or in one of the other stories, maybe there's a story in there that kind of rubs you the wrong way. Tell us about that one. That'd be cool, But whatever it is that captures your attention, take the time to read the stories and tell us how they play out in your own life. I recall the person who was the listener who had been listening for a year and hadn't written anything in. And then she writes in to tell us about how just listening to all this stuff had influenced her to make all these changes in her life. Very simply, no effort. And miraculously, so that a year later, I mean, her entire life was flying. She had lost weight. She was successful. Her family was working. I mean, that's a great kind of story, and I'm hoping we get stories, maybe not on that scale, but certainly stories that reinforce that the book really did help people, because that's what I love. That's really why I put it into the app. So take the time, fill out the form. And by the way, I did get that other form in there. When I took the time to put the book in, I put the second form in. So now you aren't limited to an ask a question form. You can just do a regular contact form too. They got 2 different forms in there. You don't have to say, oh, well, this isn't really a question, but I wanted to send it in. You just use the form. It's simple. So. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope this was a kind of a nice break from the other 13 podcasts that you did. I hope we shifted it around a little bit, because you gotta do, otherwise it can get kind of, what stale? Is that the word?
Oh no, because do you know what it is? I've been really blessed. I always get really either, whether it's guests for my podcast or guests or, hosts that I'm guesting on, I always have really cool conversations. This morning, we had one, we got going, realized that he had another meeting. I had another podcast. I went and recorded that podcast, came back and we finished up.
I love it.
Recording.
Excellent.
Yeah. It was just a really expansive conversation. We're probably going to end up doing some kind of project together around social inclusion. He works for the local government down in San Diego,
cool.
Works on their social inclusion programs and wants to do something together. And then I've got another one in an hour. Who knows what adventure that's going to be too. So it's been really, really, really cool. Really cool.
Really, that's good. Really cool. Yeah. Well, that's what keeps it going for me. I know anytime that I'm doing an episode and it gives me that lift, I want to do the next episode. So if it's doing the same thing for you that way to do all these different shows, more power to you, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Really cool.
I've found that the ones that perhaps don't have as deep a resonance, I haven't had any bad ones, but ones aren't as deep a resonance, they come, it's a pleasant experience, and then they're outshined by the others that are like, whoa, I've got a, like one guy, I was on his podcast a week or something ago. He was already coming to Cabo for a holiday. He's like, I can't wait to come down. We're going to hang out. Let's do some content or whatever. So it's like, yeah, let's do it.
Really good. All right. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you very much for the time that you spent with us. We really appreciate that. Hopefully our friend Alex is going to be back soon. We really miss her.
Yeah. We need to talk to these doctors about encroaching on our time. We need to like.
I know they have no respect whatsoever.
No respect.
So, Alex, we're thinking about you. We're looking forward to
Sending
getting you
you
back.
love, Alex.
And thank you to our live stream and podcast listeners. We'll see you all next time here on Elway Today. Goodbye, everybody.